Uh, Good morning. I just wanted to see if I had any questions. On last week, we worked on, we last thing we had was Mark 1, I think it was. Mark 1, chapter 1, uh, looking at verse 29 through 31. And we were talking about Jesus healing Peter's mother in law. And we went into that. I want to see first if we had any questions about anything that you may have had this week, or any questions about this or anything else. And let's start there, since that's usually what we do. And let's start. So, any questions from anyone? Okay. Um, this is this is a lesson then that I don't mind telling you. I don't see it all, but let's open it up and see what we see, and maybe we can talk through this. Uh, this kind of came to me as I was looking at something, and the not seeing it all is okay. Uh, to me, that is, as we kind of mentioned on last week, it's kind of like visiting a tree many times and watching the fruit develop, watching the fruit turn color until it's ripened, and so that's where we are with this. The thing that stood out with me the most with this was the word synagogue. A couple things stand out now, because I won't put it out there. Then I'll hopefully we got have enough people that can look this up and kind of make it all make sense. Uh, the one thing that was his mother-in-law. Although this is a not uncommon, especially in poor situations, for multiple families to live in one dwelling, especially uh, multiple generations. So the very fact that his mother-in-law lives in his house is not a surprising thing. What is surprising is that she's the woman of the house. It does not talk about his wife. It does not talk about his mother. And so we talked about that some on Mondays, but that still to me uh, regards some further explanation. Uh, the other thing that stands out in this to me is the number two. And I looked at the number two, looking at it from the Hebrewic understanding, uh, being two being, excuse me, bet being the second alphabet, and bet talking about house. And if you look at this, one of the words for synagogue is house. Uh, and if you see that it's in the house of Simon and Andrew, Simon and Andrew being two is house, and they were accompanied by James and John. So house keeps coming up. The spiritualness of that keeps coming up, and so that was one avenue I wanted to explore. The other one was the fact that uh, if you look at the history of how men or how God's people met with Him, if you go back and looking at uh, the Exodus and you follow the cloud, God followed them on a cloud with that first, so He was with them at all times. They had that evidence of seeing Him, and then you had the tabernacle or the tent, and it was the place that quote unquote housed God, the house of God in the tent. So then you go into I think it's First Kings, where David first wants to build a house for God. And God comes to him and explains to him he's not going to be the one to do it, but he's going to let his son do it. So Solomon builds a tent or a house for God. And that was done then, and that was the first temple. And in all detail, God let them know how he wanted them to build it. So the synagogue comes along at the time of the second temple. It was not after the second temple. They stood simultaneously. And the thing about the synagogue that differs, though, from the tabernacle and the temple is the synagogue was not regarded as the place to house God. That was one of the things that stood out to me. The first ones were sanctioned by, if you will, by God, but the synagogue was not. And again, I seem like every time I'm on, looks like the silence come. I apologize for that. But the synagogue is known as a meeting place. But the funny part about that you miss if you're not looking at this, the synagogue is known as a temple or a shoal. So when you look at it in the different ways it's used, it is a building that is used for feminine purposes as well as masculine purposes. For example, when you're teaching in it, or it is a feminine aspect, there are people coming in to receive. When you're using it to read the scrolls, it takes on a different identity. So it is used in a masculine and a feminine way, depending on how it is used. The word show, you'll see in some places, is used as show. Show just means school. It just means that it is a place that it was used for people to come together and study. But synagogue means a place of assembly. And the other thing that stood out to me was they recognized that the temple was still standing, but what the understanding was that Jerusalem was too far to go every time you wanted to pray. So they used the temple for sacrifices, and on the large holidays when the priests had things to do for the people, the sacrifices that had to be performed and the rituals that had to be performed. But on their daily worships or teachings, they would all build synagogues. So that was my take on that. And just want to stop there and see if there are any questions on any of this, because I want to hopefully pull all this together. Like I said, we talked about it on Monday, but I still felt like something was not quite there, something missing. But anybody, if you will, do you see anything in any of that we discussed so far? Go ahead, Pastor.
What did you say, Ron?
I'm saying, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
The synagogues were, when you talk about them having been set up for study, to this day, the synagogues are segregated based upon gender. They have a partition down the middle that separates males from females. And when you think about that, one of the things you mentioned to me about Exodus, when God told Moses, come up to the mountain, and I think it was, what was it, speak to the house of Israel. Would you repeat that, Ron?
Yes, sir. I'm finding it right now. God calls Moses up in Exodus 19:3, and Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel.
So, speaking to the house of Jacob and speaking of the sons of Israel, that would sound like he's repeating himself. But based on one of the things that was mentioned is that he was talking about everyone in Israel were to be addressed. That, in addition, speaks to something else about Jesus. When Jesus says to Peter, "Feed my sheep," and he does it 3 times. He says sheep twice, and he says lamb once. And the first, if you look at it in Aramaic, the first one is speaking of a male sheep. The second one is speaking of a female. And the third one is speaking of a lamb, a baby, a child. So Jesus is saying to Peter that Peter is to teach everyone. He's speaking of teaching everyone without regard to gender or age. So when we talk about the synagogue being separated based on being segregated based on gender, that in itself is antithetical to the scriptures, because there is no indication that the females were to be separate from males. There is no indication that the females did not have a part in the decision making for the nation to grow and fulfill the command of the Creator. And the reason I say there's no indication of that is because early on we see how Sarah and Rebecca and Hagar and the other females influenced the direction of the nation by virtue of pushing the nation to a place where it would pursue an understanding of its Creator. Also, if you really give thought to it, what we see is that in order to stay on course, they meaning the women, had to overrule what males were doing or intending to do. And to this day, we see the adverse results of male dominance of the male exerting physical power and physical strength in a place where it should be spiritual. And when spiritual strength is recognized, that it is usually guided by the influence of the female. And to speak of the synagogue, especially during the period that Jesus was in the earth, with the understanding that it was primarily for men, and when women were there, they could not intermingle with the men because of the strict laws that were in place that would not allow a female who was not a part of the family of a male to interact with her, especially in public. And to this day, that type of segregation still exists in the synagogue, with the exception of what is called progressive synagogues, or I forget the name of the type, the label that they put on the Judaism that allows for females and males to intermingle in the synagogue. So I do think that is an asset for us to understand that the foundation of the synagogue teachings were not in keeping with what had been done previously when it came to the interaction of males and females on the journey of understanding. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question. Why was sacrifices necessary in the synagogue?
Sacrifices were done in the temple. But go ahead, Pastor.
That's like it meant to say it's in the temple.
Okay.
And they were done out of obedience. And when we read in the writings of Isaiah and some of the other prophets, we read where God says that He never requires a sacrifice, because the sacrifice of bullock is no different than sacrificing a man. And there are other places in the Scripture where the same message is given. Based upon that, it appears as though the sacrifices were something that was instituted by the priesthood. And that is no different than what is being done today. Whether you are sacrificing an animal or whether you are sacrificing your congregation by virtue of fleecing them, sacrifice, and both of them are unacceptable to our Creator. I hope that helps you, ma'am.
So what is it that's being sacrificed today?
The congregation.
The congregation, meaning?
When you take advantage of your people, you're sacrificing them. When you have an anniversary and require X number of dollars, that's sacrificing them. They are not making a sacrifice. You are sacrificing them because you're putting them in a place of you're putting pressure on them. And some of them, you are forcing them to choose between medication and being embarrassed because they did not pay what you told them to pay. And that's the same thing with a revival or anything else. Anything that you pressure people to render other than tithe and offering, you are sacrificing them because you don't know what kind of pain and pressure you put it on them in regards to their income or their obligations. Does that help you?
It does.
Okay.
So why they didn't have to do sacrifices for the temple?
They did sacrifices in the temple.
I thought I heard you said that they didn't do sacrifice in the temple, but they did it in the synagogue.
Oh,
okay.
The other way around. They did them in the temple. They didn't do them in the synagogue.
Okay.
Yeah, Evelyn, your question is brings something to light. That, but you notice here what I said when I kind of gave a history on quote unquote the church or God's people and how they gathered and how they saw God. What I was showing you is the synagogue came about because of man's desire to gather and to worship and read the Old Testament or read the scriptures. So you notice here that this is different than what God described to them to do in the Old Testament. So it is believed that the synagogues came about when they were captured in who was the first one? It wasn't the Babylonians, but when they were in exile and they were scattered about, and where they were scattered, they wanted to worship God. They wanted so that's where these synagogues started popping up. And so it kind of caught on. But the interesting thing here is Jesus did some teaching in the synagogue, and you do not see where he rebuked the synagogue. So that's why this is interesting to me, trying to figure out what takes place. I see this as a transformation. I see this as Jesus opening up the synagogue to opening up us to show up the spirituality and what it's supposed to be taking place here. Because we talked about that the house talks about femininity. So it says he leaves the synagogue, so he leaves a certain type of house, and he goes into the house of Simon and Andrew. And Simon is very interesting because Simon is his Hebrew name. Simon is the same person as Peter and Cephas. So he had three names. One is Hebrew, one is Greek, and one is Aramaic. So that didn't escape me. And his brother's name comes from a Greek origin. It means to be a man. It means manly, to be brave. So you look at that and you go into that house, and it's in that house that has the sick mother-in-law. So you see femininity here, and you see the transformation I speak of is not just the Jews, but Jesus or the Word of God showing that I am here to bring balance to mankind. Regardless if you're Hebrew, regardless of your culture being Aramaic, regardless of your culture being Greek. So that's the transformation I'm speaking of here. But I'm just curious as to if anybody else sees something stronger or different, or what do you see here?
Ron, when you talk about the light, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Are you?
All right, sure. This is Nick. You can go ahead.
Well, I was listening to Ron. He was talking about the house represents the feminine. And I think about how when you have a family structure and the female leaves, it's like the light goes out of the house. The house doesn't function anymore. Eventually, it ends up a lot of times not there. The house is there, but that energy that the feminine bring is no longer there, and it's just different. So I'm seeing some things, Ron, when you talk about the feminine represent the house itself. So, okay, I'm just listening. Go ahead.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you. Appreciate that addition. That helps. Nick?
Sure. I just wanted to return a little bit to the concept of sacrifice and sacrifice being done in the temple. The temple is itself always meant to be symbolic of you or us, our not only physical body, but our sort of spiritual body. And I think there's a sort of primal confusion that is found in religion, every religion, as to the nature of sacrifice. And just like back in Genesis, when, who was it, either Cain or Abel, one of them sacrificed a lamb and one of them sacrificed or gave a burnt offering of sort of the things that he grew in the ground, and one of them gave a burnt offering of the lamb. The blood sacrifice materially is such a sort of a horrible sounding thing, but what it is spiritually representative of you making a sacrifice of your own blood, metaphorically. So you purify yourself, as opposed to an external physical or material thing being sort of put in place of yourself. And in Genesis, that's the distinction between making the burnt offering of sort of the products of the fields versus the lamb. The lamb is the blood, which is you. So there's no need to offer anything outside of yourself, because it is you sort of focusing on yourself and growing and evolving yourself spiritually based on what you recognize within yourself needs to be sacrificed or purified in order to make the spiritual changes necessary for growth and evolution. And it goes all the way from the beginning up to the creation of the temple. The temple is, as I said, us. And the Holy of Holies within the temple and wherever the sacrifice is made is that portion of self that we purify or let go of in order for that spiritual growth and evolution to take place. I'm done.
And that's the part I kind of see and kind of stuck on, Nick. I think you opened it up. I think that's the part Jesus is linking together, because in short, you are the temple, you are the synagogue. This is talking about you. This is not talking about the physicalness of any of this. This is the evolution of the spiritual man that I think is being described here. And so I think that ties in beautifully. If you look at verse 29, it says, and immediately after they had come out of the synagogue, they go into the house of Simon and Andrew. Immediately after they come out of one house, they go into another. So there is a tie-in there with those houses. There is a something there that's showing us that these are one in the same, and there is a transformation that is, or maybe not a transformation as much as a revealing. The word immediately here caught my attention because it's used again in verse 30. It says, and immediately at the bottom of verse 30, they spoke to him about her, about the sickness of the mother. So the immediately is not talking so much about the haste of him doing something. The immediately is talking about the intent. This is what has to be done. There is no vacillating here. This is what needs to be done. So it talks about the absoluteness of it more than anything else. So, like I say, this is all intriguing, and I think I think with you going back and giving a history of sacrifice in the temple, it kind of tied in. I still, don't know how to pull all this together, but that helps. And again, I think it has a lot to do with the unfolding of us and showing, almost like Adam and Eve, showing you what's in you, what you're made of, what's your spiritual essence. This is who you are. And in this case, the being that is being shown this is the portion of us that is vacillating between being the portion of us that is vacillating with being the Peter, which is Greek, the Sefer, which is Aramaic, and then Simon, which is Hebrew. We recognize that there are a lot of voices. There are a lot of, and this is talking about the man who's seeking truth. This isn't talking about Joe Blow in the street. This is talking about he who is seeking truth. So it is opportunity for us to see who we are and exactly who we are.
Ron,
That makes sense. I said a lot of stuff. Yeah, yes, sir.
something dawned on me. I think that there may be a message in the way that Peter is referenced with those names, as was their message with Moses' father-in-law, with his name being Reuel, and can't think of the other one. I think there's a message there.
Yeah.
Suppose that the Greek name that is used to reference Peter is speaking to the eruption of spirituality by those who are unable to see anything spiritual, or very little, I should say. And the Hebrew reference speaks to the idea, the concept of making efforts to hold on to the old ways of the priest. And the Aramaic speaks to desiring to follow the teachings of Jesus. At the same time, you have to purge yourself of the things that the priesthood set in place, and purge yourself as to the things that were set in place by the Greeks, based upon their lack of understanding of what the scriptures were about, or spirituality in general. If that's the case, then would that not be speaking to us, not just today, but yesterday and in the future as well? Because I think that each one of those descriptors that I mentioned is a part of us, or at the very least, if it's not a part, all three of them are part, they have been. So what do you think?
I think that's an excellent observation. I'll tell you how to tie in. When you said that, what I see is the brother has a name. Andrew's name is a Greek name. So suppose that the mother-in-law is half Greek or is Greek, and maybe the father was Aramaic or Hebrew, so the fight is real, is what I'm saying, because as was explained, as the mother goes, so goes the family, so goes the children, and she has a very powerful role in influencing her household. And from what you're saying, if you that ties to that, I think that this fever that this is talking about, it means to kindle or start a fire. It means to stir something up, to cause it to go ablaze, or to glow or to illuminate. So, in other words, this can go either way. It can be to your destruction and you go one way, or you can go the other way and use the fire as purification and allow you to see truth.
So, Peter, when thou art converted, strengthen your brother.
Yes. So that may explain that, and I'm still trying to see, because that was my whole thing. Why mother-in-law? And I think you told me Monday. I wrote down wall of protection. What I want you to do, if you will, Pastor, what we talked about with the weight part of it, tie that in, with the protection as you see this as what we just talked about, if you would please.
You say the wait.
Wait, because it says, and she waited on them.
Oh.
And what we're saying is that is not the serving that we came to understand it to mean.
There is not a servant as in serving the table. No. The way I perceive that is based upon what I've understood about the scriptures when it comes to a Greek and a Hebrew being married or having children together, however you want to term it. Usually, based upon what the scripture presents to us, the female is usually the Hebrew, and the male is the Roman, as it was with Paul. You don't see in the scripture, at least I haven't anyway, and maybe I should see it that way. I have not seen in the scriptures thus far where a Hebrew man married a Roman woman. But I have seen consistently where Roman men connected themselves and had children with Hebrew women. And in this particular case, this would be the protector in that regard, because the protection is by the female. And what is that protection against? What is it for? That protection is for the guidance of the child, in this case Peter and the brother, guiding them in the ways of the Hebrew in terms of its relationship with the Creator, as opposed to them being guided, being led astray and guided in the manner of the Romans, who really did not have a set of spiritual beliefs at all. That's how I perceive it, Ron.
Okay.
And in terms of the servant, what she actually did, serving them was like guiding them in the right direction, of pointing them in the direction that they were to go.
It does. I want it to make sense to everybody, though. Any feedback, because I want us to see where we are today with this. Questions or comments, y'all?
I have a comment and a question. What Pastor was just saying there about not seeing any Jewish men marrying outside of their culture. I know today Jewish lineage is through the mother. So I don't know if it was the same back then, but that may be a reason why Jewish men didn't marry outside of their culture. But you would consider Jewish if you had a Jewish mother. But my question is, going back to what Nick was talking about, sacrifice and the place. My question is, so the place inside us is, in terms of sacrificing in a place, the place inside us is the space that we make to reflect on the Creator, who He is, who it is, what it is, and the space that we make inside of us that brings us to a realization of who we are? Is that the space, the place, or the house inside us? I know I'm rambling, but anyway. That's my question.
You're not rambling. Nick, you want to respond to that question?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, you're correct. The house that we are sort of refers to us generally, but it's kind of like there are different areas of the temple. There's the Holy of Holies and all the sort of stages you go through to get to that. That's talking about a progressively deeper part of self that is closer to the core of our awareness and connection to the Creator and to all things.
Okay, that's part of what I forgot to say. That Holy of Holies is the space inside of us that we make with the intention of connecting to the Creator.
Yes.
Okay.
And the sacrifice is anything that we do that we recognize we need to do to strengthen that connection and awareness of who and what we are and our connection to the Creator. Anything that stands in the way of that, that is, could be anything, wherever our focus is, wherever our emotional state is, where our mental state is, all things that do anything to muddy that connection, to interfere with that connection. Those are the things that are required for sacrifice.
Nick, I want to use what you just said based on Audrey's question to kind of tie this up. So if I look at this and look at life, what you're saying is what counts right now is seeing who I am and coming to that understanding. What has happened in the past, I do not have to try to rid that. I can use it as a catalyst or as energy to move forward, meaning I don't have to let it become a fever in me. I don't have to let it be sick. But if it does become that, you're saying that it can be sacrificed, it can be purged. But if I learn who I am based on those three principles that Pastor talked about, if I come to the realization that I am sticking with the teaching, then everything else that has happened in my past becomes the catalyst or the energy to push me forward. It is just those experiences that have led me to the place I am now. But if there is something, as you were saying, that really needs some attention, then there is a way to rid myself of it through the sacrifice. It does not have to take me out unto death or even into a place of sickness. And that makes sense at all?
It does, and I agree. And the purpose for us being in this material experience is to experience catalyst, is to be put in a place that essentially forces us to grow spiritually. And it is entirely how we respond to those things that we experience that determines whether they are a hindrance or a catalyst. And you mentioned earlier the word shul being used for synagogue. I think originally the word shul is German or something, but it's where we get the word school. But it is very similar to Sheol, which is generally when we think of Sheol, we think of that's the Hebrew version of the underworld, the grave. And that's what this is. This is the spiritual underworld wherein we learn the very purpose for our existence and what it means to be a consciously aware spiritual being.
So, so Nick, what we're saying is that two things. One is that sacrifice is not what you lose. Sacrifice is what you gain. What am I saying? When we talk about creating space, what do we mean? What does that look like? If we fill ourselves with what our eyes desire, then that is filling a space with things or with principles that are not in keeping with spirituality. The moment that we have a genuine desire for truth, then we began a unconscious purging of those things that we see with our eyes. And we began to seek with the eye. And when that happens, those those material things that have been blinders to us are removed, not removed physically, but our desire has shifted from them to the desire for truth. And that's what opens the eye. So the sacrifice is not losing anything, it's gaining an understanding of who we are created to be. In regards to the school, something clicked when you said that, Nick, about the underworld. If we look at the history of schools and teachings from their inception, they were about teaching spiritual things. They were not about getting an academic education so we could make more money or get a job. Up until, I suppose, around the 1600s maybe, education was predicated on Eastern principles. And the education of Eastern principles was spiritual understanding, knowing about self and the earth itself. Also, the things that we call getting a job they were done through becoming journeyman, or you would be an apprentice to someone, and that's how you learn medicine. That's how you learn engineering. That's how you learn agriculture. All those things were prevalent up until, I guess, about the 1600s, maybe earlier than that. But education itself was totally different than what we think it is now. So when we talk about the synagogue as being a school, that was not where people went to learn how to read and write. That's where people went to make every effort to understand what the scriptures are saying, which means that they were going there in search of spirituality. Is that in keeping with what you were saying, Nicholas?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And let me add one more thing to what I was saying. The fundamental confusion of religion that sort of makes religion what it is the desire to materialize everything that is meant to be spiritual. out of ignorance or out of selfishness, but it is the inability to spiritually interface with teachings or spiritually interface with anything, and the need to make that thing physical because the underlying I, the single I, is relatively closed. I'm done. Thank you.
And I think a great example of that, Nick, and the rest of us, okay, of course, is that it can be seen rather in what we call preparation for teaching. What we're beginning to see is that the steps that we used for academic preparation for teaching are not as relevant now as they once were, in that the preparation that we make for teaching is simple desire, and you may see a verse that catches your attention and you can't let it go, but then you feel like you're not ready to teach it because you've not had time to explore it. Yet, when we start talking, you may not even want the verse to come up, but it comes up anyway. And we begin to see it with a greater clarity. And it's not because of our preparation in terms of academic preparation. It's simply because of our desire, our spiritual desire for truth. Thanks.
So, Nick, I think you just described how religion is corrupted, because instead of, as you said, instead of leaving the spiritual as spiritual, they try to make it into something material or something that can be exploited. So yeah, you just described exactly how the Romans and Greeks appropriated the teachings of the Egyptians, how the evangelicals appropriated the Azusa Street revival, all of that. Yeah, it's just become corrupted based on their want for material things, and if not material things, just their own want for recognition and accolades. So yeah, interesting.
Yep. And let me add, hopefully this is not going on a tangent or anything, but I'm sure we've mentioned that bull statue that is on Wall Street is the golden calf. That is very much the earthly symbol of the worship of materiality. And it's interesting that the bull is one of the meanings of the letter Aleph. So you see how this worship of materiality is the inversion of spirituality. It's the perverted sort of polar opposite.
Repeat that again, Nick, about Wall Street.
The statue of the bull that you see on Wall Street is the golden calf recreated. It is the inversion of spirituality, and it is the worship of materiality. The letter Aleph is one of the meanings of it is bull, and that's where it comes from. But in seeing that, you can see how the letter Aleph, which is directing your attention to spirituality, is sort of perverted and inverted and drawn into materiality in a sort of vortex of confusion and selfishness in the creation of the golden calf, in the creation of the bull.
Thank you, sir.
So I have a question. Is the head of religion being severed or has been severed?
The authority of religion has been severed. And the way I see that is there is a scripture that talks about Ichabod was placed on the doorframe, and it means God left them and they knew it not. Religion has lost its authority. However, it has not seen it yet, or is not in a place where it is willing to accept that reality. So the response to your question is yes. It has lost its authority. Helps you, ma'am?
Yeah, because I look at it, so I'm wondering why it looks as if it's still thriving. It's like when you cut the head off of a snake or something, the tail just keep moving, but eventually it dies.
It looks like it's still thriving because that's the way you see it. What do I mean? What you call thriving, what you see as thriving, rather, I should say, is what is functioning, what it's doing. But the question is not what it's doing. It can do the same thing that it's always done, yet have no influence. So it does not have the influence that it once had. It has it thinks it does, but it really doesn't. Because if it did, then the people who are refusing to return, the people who are refusing to play those games, would not be where they are in terms of not playing those games. They would actually be playing the game. So the influence is gone. It's nowhere near where it was, and I don't believe that the end of religion ended recently. I think there was a period when we watched people of influence in religion, pastors and preachers who were influential. They either transitioned or they began to experience the dementia and other illnesses that would not allow them to function as in a manipulative way as they once did. In terms of the political Christianity, political religion, it began to lose. I mean, its influence can be seen as being lost as well. And every single day that another piece of evidence is exposed, and what happened on January 6th, you see a representation of the loss of influence by evangelical Christianity. Now, you may say that's a leap, but I say to you, no, not really, because without evangelical Christianity, there would be no Trump. And without Trump, there would not have been a January 6th. Without evangelical religion, no cover-up. So every time a piece of evidence comes surfaces, we see another step where that influence is being shown that it does not exist anymore. Does that help you, Ms. Evans?
It does, and while you were talking, it's like they're trying to climb up a waterfall.
Yes.
And, you know, you're not going anywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you're not going to get anywhere, and it's over.
Well, the funny thing about it is this. No one has influence unless you give it to them. The only way that anyone influences you is that you allow them to. If you really think about the influence that religion had on every one of us, it lasted until we started searching for what the scriptures were really saying, which means that we allowed them to influence us. We gave them that influence. And the moment we were able to what the scriptures are really saying, that influence died. Make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Right.
And could it be that this is the very first time in the history of the earth that light is being shined on religion to this degree?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely, because honestly, religion has never had any, and I don't like this word, I can't think of another one, any competition. It has not experienced a formidable adversary because all the adversaries to religion were based upon physical abutment, physical attacks, physical ways to end it. Be they academic, which is also physical, or were they by the barrel of a gun. This is the first time that there has been a openly genuine spiritual exposure of what religion is and what it's doing. And the reason is because we had been indoctrinated, we meaning everyone in religion, had been indoctrinated into believing if we ask questions, that was great, until we asked a question that no one wanted to answer or they couldn't answer. And then we were being blasphemous. And we were afraid that we were going to hell for being blasphemous. Not understanding that if we are created in that image, then the questions that we raise has to come from the image in which we were created.
Yeah.
So that means that our Creator did not give anybody a mandate to decide who's going to hell and who's not. That mandate as to who's going to hell and who's not came from the manipulation of spirituality by European minds who never understood what spirituality is. Make sense?
Yes, sir. I wanna make a statement, and then I'm gonna call you guys' name, okay? Because you guys have done a marvelous job of seeing this. Uh, Pastor and Audrey and Nick, I want you guys to sum this up so it all makes sense. Here's my statement, though, that I see that, how I see it. And if I'm wrong, you can clear that up too. The mother-in-law played the same role that the women did in the Old Testament. She looks a lot like Sarah does here. And what I'm saying is what she is doing is preparing, opening the door for spirituality for the future. If it had been his mother, it would have been a lawful thing for her, and the story is not the same. If she is Hebrew and she does what the Hebrews teaching of the ritual of a house as the mother does at the head of the house, she has obligations. This is the mother-in-law, and I think it is no coincidence that it does not make the distinction as to her origin, not even her name, to give away her origin, because she is totally spiritual here. So if you look at it from that perspective, and now I'm tying in everything you guys have said, bring all of this about, tie this together for us, and so we can see this and it be clear.
I see it as being representative of the unwavering influence of femininity. I see it as being a representation of the inability to foster the power of feminine energy. And the reason I see it that way is because it is saying it does not matter whether that feminine energy is the energy out of whose womb you came, or the feminine energy that you attach yourself to through marriage. If you look at the mother-in-law does not have a parental role in the life of Peter. So when you use that as mother-in-law, it's saying that feminine energy plays a role in everyone's life, regardless of whether you see it, accept it, or can explain it. It does indeed play a role. And the reason I say that this image of the mother-in-law plays a role in everyone's life is the message saying that, rather, is because, not so much because of what happened in the house, it's because of what happened as a result of what took place in the house. And the result of what took place in the house was that as the evening came and the darkness fell, there were a numerous amount of people in front of the house waiting to be healed and bringing others to be healed. That would not have happened if there had not been that interaction with the mother-in-law. So I see that as the mother-in-law being the entrance of the horn of plenty, and everything that comes out the other end and at the wider space of it is what took place. However, if it had not been for what took place at the beginning, then we would not see what took place as a result of that. So I see it as the message telling us sacrifice is not what you give up. Sacrifice is based upon what you receive. desire. Excuse me. Because when we started searching for truth, we did not know would you mute your phone, please? We did not know what we would have to relinquish. We only knew what we were looking for and didn't know what that looked like. It is only when we were captured by truth that we were able to see the purging that had taken place in order for us to experience the nature of truth. So all of this is saying to us that the utmost respect that we have expressed for the Shekinah has resulted in bringing balance to this earth realm. And with our understanding that the scriptures cannot be academically understood or academically analyzed, that they have to be spiritually revealed to us. By virtue of embracing that, we are able to see that our desires for others to understand what the scriptures are saying, our desire for that is being fulfilled, not in that we are traveling around teaching, but being fulfilled because we understand we simply have to put it in the macro in order for that revelation and experience to take place for others. I spoke with, and in the past I've spoken with, and recently with people who are engaged in Christianity, and they talk about going places, traveling to teach this, without realizing that we are traveling. We are on the move. We've traveled further than we ever have in our lives because by virtue of our being home physically, we have traveled the world spiritually, influencing and changing directions and embedding questions in the hearts of men. That's what I see. Of course, there's a little bit more, but I'm done.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. This fits well with me now. We finished the other night, and I still have some questions and a little uneasiness about not bad, but just something wasn't there. I see this now. I see it clear. I hope everyone else does. And you said something, Pastor, that made me see something else. That word "wait," and as I mentioned to you the other day, it is the same word that is being used in Genesis. Genesis, where it talks about, I think chapter 1, where it talks about gathering the waters. Let me find that. So that is a spiritual term. And then God said, let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place. So that gathering is the same word there as that word wait. And it talks about to be active, to be, not only be watchful and be hopeful, but to be active as though this thing is already done. So, and Pastor added, it talks about to twist or to bind something together. So the spiritualness of it, as you just finished speaking, and you can help me with this, then is the traveling is our words. The breath that you speak are already in the universe. This is already done. This is if you look at it in terms of the waters being gathered, this is already taking place. So it is not saying that from a spiritual perspective that you have to physically go anywhere. Putting this thing in the macro world is extremely real, and it has consequences as though you were there in the physical yourself. Am I seeing that right?
Yep.
Anyone else? I hope this makes sense. It does to me, and I'm grateful for that. I hope that it makes sense to everyone. But do we have any questions or comments?
This is Barbara. Good morning. In the time of the Hebrews, when they were worshiping in the synagogues, I understood what you said, Pastor, that there's a separation in the synagogues and women on one side, men on the other. But in the time of, even before Jesus, the Hebrews, were women allowed in the synagogue at all?
Before the advent of Jesus, the women were not allowed in the temple at all. And, excuse me, they were allowed in the, I'm trying to think of the period that they were allowed in the synagogue. And the reason I'm pondering that is because when Paul said if a woman needs to learn, let her learn at home, ask her husband, that was speaking about the synagogue. And when Jesus came into the earth physically, there were synagogues already. So I'm not sure, Barbara, as to when. Ron was talking about doing the Babylonian experience, and that if it started at that time or before that time, I'm not sure if they were allowed in when they were first built, or was it something that happened over time with the priest making that decision? I'm not sure about that. However, I do know that Ron is very anxious to do the research to find out the answer to that.
I'll show and tell him. I'll let him know.
But I'm not sure. Seriously, I'm not. But every picture that I have seen of a synagogue, be it ancient or presently, they have petitions down the center with the separation of men and women. And that's one of the reasons I'm puzzled by it.
I will say, though, it was one of my questions when I saw it said, and immediately they left and came into his house. That was the question I had. Were there any women allowed? But I didn't speak to it because I had no idea. I didn't know either.
It's relatively real that they were allowed during Jesus' time because of what happened with the conversations of Paul. Remember? The writings of Paul, rather.
Okay.
And
unless he was too.
This is Nick. I just wanted to add, I bet that's another, like the separation of men and women, I bet that's another, well, it is a sort of confusion introduced by religion, but I bet it's the confusion comes from the like important distinction between femininity and masculinity from a spiritual perspective, but it's a distinction that was never meant to turn into a separation. Because I think like even Egyptian temples had this sort of separation, well, not separation, but distinction between sort of outer, inner, masculine, feminine. And I think that just mirrors how energy works. And in attempting to recreate that same pattern, that's where that sort of distinction and eventually separation comes from, I believe.
The reason I asked that question is, and I know I'm seeing this in a different layer in a sense. When you look at the revealed meaning of Bet, it talks about a dwelling place or a house or a home, and it can also mean, the house of God, or it can be in the house of a prison. It can mean the house as in a household, or anything in a house, like the commandments talk about not coveting thy neighbor's house, sort of thing. It's sort of saying that God's house is our physical, in our physical world, is where God dwells. When he healed, when he lifted, what does it say? How does it say that about the mother-in-law? They left the sanctuary. And the reason I asked about the sanctuary and who was at the sanctuary, was it all men at the sanctuary at that time? Is my question. Then he came in and the wrong mark. And he lifted. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my spot. I was in the wrong mark. I had gone ahead to Mark 2. He came in and lifted her up. He took her by the hand and lifted her up. She was fevered. And another meaning of lifted is to waken also, to rouse, to take up, to stand. But I'm wondering if, because the Bet, the concealed meaning of Bet spiritually is that it is the container in which the left resides. And Aleph, left Aleph, I call it left. Aleph is the oneness, the represents the aspect of the unbridled divine force that enlivens us. But it's manifested in a container, and that represents not only that physical container in the physical world, but the hidden meaning of it is that the divinity, the oneness of who we really are, of the essence of the Creator, resides in the physical container. The most hidden place of the spiritual is the physical. And I'm wondering if, as it relates to the woman representing Shekinah, Bet also represents the duality, creation and duality. And when we talk about evil and rightness and unrightness, we talk about man and female. Bet is that container where we have the opportunity to resolve and mesh together these seeming opposites, which are not really opposites. Bet is that container, and it's only in the sense of oneness of masculine and feminine energy are we able to get to that point where we're able to see that there is no duality, there is only oneness. and I don't know. I'm like you, Ron. I have my own questions now about the influence of the woman, with the mother-in-law, and whether that represents the Shekinah in a sense.
I think it does. I think you just answered a question I didn't even know I had. Yeah, this what you described makes sense, and the lifting up, I think, kind of points it out. See, the one thing that I said that we never tied in, the other ones in the where we look at the temple or the tabernacle, the cloud, there was balance there because there was the Creator. There was masculine and femininity. But it makes sense of what you're saying. This synagogue represents something new that man says, I want to see the Creator. I want to better understand myself. I'm in exile. I'm away from everything, and I want to be with the Creator, but I don't invite the femininity. I want to. So, what am I seeing? What is not clear? So maybe I'm just trying to tie in what you just said. Maybe that duality is the balance that was needed, and it's showing, as someone said before, you're not losing anything here. You're gaining everything, and it really sort of what brings about the balance. He lifted her up. He brought about. Oh yeah, I like that. I can't explain what you said, but I see it.
I think that's partially what I said, because what I was saying is that we were created from the Creator, and to be a creator, we have to be able to balance or mesh together those seeming opposites, which really are not opposites. And the blessings that we receive, what we see as blessings occur when we can do that, and we can only do that in light of balance between feminine and masculine energy. That's what gives us the oomph, if you will, that we need to be able to resist allowing our thoughts to be imbalanced by one thing or the other. I don't know how to say it, but anyway.
Apart from what I can see what you are saying, but when Ron said that when they're in exile, they were like, I want to see God. It's almost like they felt like God did not exist where they were in terms of being in exile, and they had to bring into existence a structure that where they could meet God in order for them to remain connected. So it was a creation of men for the benefit of men. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
I think that it's intriguing to me now to find out what's going on with this, you know?
Yes. Yes.
So
yeah.
Maybe that's something we'll look at and make every effort to see what's being if not for tomorrow, at some point soon.
Okay. Not only do I want to thank everyone today for bringing clarity to this, I want to something, Ms. Thelma.
1 second before you go to something else.
Okay.
Barbara Jean, are you on board with making, well, all of us really, I'm asking if any of us would do that, would look at the synagogue experience, its origin, and in doing so, making every effort to see what it represents, not only then, but now. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can. I will participate.
You sound like Ron. Okay.
Yeah. No, all I was going to say is I got a text message from Miss Thelma this week, and she talked about, I hope she don't mind me sharing this. I don't think she will. The joy she gets out of it when all the teachers kind of pull stuff together and make things clear like this. And then today this came about, and this has me excited. I enjoy this as well, because it's okay to get on the line and say, you know what, I got a lesson, but I don't see it all. And we sit down and pull our resources together, and everybody brings a piece that makes the puzzle complete or nearly complete. And that is extremely enjoyable to me.
And that's the difference between spirituality, seeing a lesson spiritually and seeing it academically.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I love it.
Well, academically, I can only describe the lesson within the boundaries of my mind. But when we do it spiritually, there are no boundaries, and it's everybody's input, which has no boundaries, and so light has to come. There's no way it cannot.
Yeah. I like that.
And also, Ron, if I may, in terms of just speaking about, the importance of what we're learning, the ultimate, aim of education in Egypt was for one to become one with God. And I think that, today, and as we continue to, operate and be who we are as Elohim, I think spirituality has conquered religion. In terms of how education in the religious terms were taught, I think that we are going back to, the beginning as you go back to Genesis, and I, believe that we're seeing it in the truth of how it was meant to be taught, but we have to return, back to beginnings. And there was some time, Ron, that you spoke about the 4 rivers. I don't know if you can recall this, but this was years ago. And as it comes back to my remembrance, I thought about Genesis 2, when it was said that the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. And so I truly believe that there's something in the waters that, we are going to see manifest, that we can even have a better understanding in terms of how it all began, in the waters of Nun. And again, I'm still, resonating in my spirit, but I see it manifesting where, again, spirituality, again, existed before religion. And I think we're getting to the truths of it really having significance, meaning, for humanity. And so, I truly appreciate, the lesson being taught today. And, I'm excited about, where we are and how the Spirit is moving us to be able to bring, truth and bring harmony and balance, to, our movement in that way. I'm done.
Thank you, George, and that adds, a beautiful conclusion, I guess, to today. I mean, we make every effort, as Barbara said, to unravel truth, and it is when we all come together, it is not a task at all, and I too enjoy it. It brings me great pleasure. In fact, it's probably something I look forward to the most. Out of everything I do in the course of my days and weeks.
Ron?
This is quite a yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. One more observation that what George said just resonated with me. Talking about the waters, but when we talked about Jesus crossing over in the boat, so I think Peter had to go to his mother-in-law's house as a type of crossing over, so that what needed to be revealed, or the healing that needed to have taken place, would be able to take place, because he crossed over into a new realm, so that the Shekinah could do what it needed to do, which is give life, which is water. So all of that sort of connects together for me. Anyway, that's all I have.
It does. Thank you. It does indeed. And I think I said at the beginning, I saw it as a transformation, but I had no idea what it meant, or what I was, what was there. And you guys cleared it up. But you're absolutely right. It is a transformation, and it absolutely had to take place. It absolutely has to take place now. It's what we're doing, as Evelyn mentioned about religion. This death is not a physical death to religion. It is being overtaken. It's being overpowered in a very soft, gentle, unevasive, way. It's taking place right now. So, and it is funny. It's something you and George said. We talk about water in almost every lesson we have. But yeah, I too will look at the word synagogue and see if we can shed a little more light on that, maybe tomorrow. Okay. Any other questions or comments before we go, or observations of any kind?
I have an observation.
Yes, sir.
Well, maybe not an observation, but maybe just a statement. At some point, I do believe that George is going to yield and tell us what he actually sees in the waters of noon. One day that's going to happen, don't you think, Ron? Because he mentions that quite often.
My name's not Ron, but I think so too.
So, and I know he's still on.
Yes, I am, and I sincerely, appreciate, the encouragement, because it's been in my spirit, to share, just my spiritual insight on that, and I know that, in looking at it, from a spiritual perspective, it all started, with the nun, in terms of the substance and the matter of our beginning and our origin. And so, again, when that time is available, I'll be more than happy to just share my insights on that, when time permits or when I'm available to do that.
I appreciate that. The time is always available. And something I saw there, too. I don't think there is any coincidence whatsoever that Catholicism uses the nun for nuns, the females who serve them, putting it in a place of servitude or treating it as though it's beneath them. I don't think it's a coincidence that took place, because I do believe that the priests in the Catholic Church recognize, the priests, the bishops, etc., recognize the feminine aspects of the waters and chose to do what they've done in terms of making the nuns silent, present, and treating them as though they are there for their pleasure. I think it's interesting to look at it also from that perspective. Thank you.
It reminds me of what Nick said about the inversion of the golden calf on Wall Street and what it's become. And this is like the inversion of the feminine essence, and how man has perceived it as servitude, as in the nun serving others. But when it's so much different, it's so different.
Absolutely.
I want to conclude with this, and I hope it ties in with what Nick and Barbara just reminded us of. I was reading an article about these scientists in Botswana who had found that the virus had mutated again, and it is I keep forgetting the name, Omicron virus, and they alerted the world to what they had found, and it was due to 3 passengers who had just left Europe coming into their country. And so when they alerted other scientists across the world, there were scientists in Europe and the Netherlands that said, hey, we know about it. And immediately a ban was put on Botswana, and they became angry about it, of course. And, you know, and the world looked at them as though they were the cause of this thing, when it had actually touched Europe a week prior and nobody was aware of it. And the isolation it further hurts them as far as getting vaccines, whereas the world is pushing now to get boosters. They're still trying to get all their people vaccinated. And so it just put a strain on all those things, all the supplies that their country needs to survive anyway. But it just made me think, as we were talking, that inversion is what we're doing. That those corrections, those things that, for example, that seems like everything negative comes from countries of that can't defend themselves, countries of color, and that is real and it is powerful. But I don't think, as we said earlier, there's been a formidable foe against it up until now. So be encouraged as we open these things up, and it may take some days or weeks, but we keep plugging along, and we plug along not as journeyman or as someone who's taxing to get through it. We do it as we see it, but we are uncovering truth, and those things that have been inverted in the earth we will soon see truth be prevailing across the land, and I try not to fix that in my head to try to know what that's going to look like. I know what I would like it to look like, but that's not right. So I just want to let you guys know I appreciate you. This has deeper ramifications than we could ever think of, I guess, and it goes beyond this phone line. I have to believe that with all my heart. Well, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
hope you have a and hopefully we'll be able to shed some more light on this, or talk about something else tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Ron.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everybody.